This is Behind the Mix. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the mix of a song that I did this week. It's a cover of Purple Rain. I was really happy with how the final mix turned out. I actually spent 2 days on it. I usually do everything in 1 day, but this one I just kind of finessed it a little bit more, and I tried a few different things that I was really happy with. So yeah, let's just start with the basic structure, and I'll explain what I did to each instrument and make how I worked it into the mix and things like that. So I wanted the song to start very basic, so it's really recognizable on the original, the chord progression from the intro. So I wanted to keep a little bit of that, but obviously make it my own as well. So it just starts with a simple guitar. So that guitar was recorded direct through a Chandler preamp. And what I did to that guitar in the actual mix is I put some heavy compression from a Golden Age Comp 3A and LA3A emulation. So that was the first thing. EQ wise, just brought out the mids a little bit. I didn't do nothing crazy on it. If I could just check it out, I brought out the 2K range, and I boosted quite a bit in the 330 for some odd reason, but it seems to have worked on that. So there you go, no EQ and EQ, but right now you are hearing the heavy compression on it. As far as effects, I'm using the main delay from my Moog unit, and let's hear how that sounds. So you could hear that really nice analog delay in that mix. And it's also going through a bit of reverb from the Roland R880, and that is a really big hall sound that I kind of tweaked to my taste. So you can hear it with the hall. And it also has a bit of chorus and reverb from the PCM80 on the Lexicon. So there it is, dry. Let's just solo that one more time. A little bit of the PCM80 chorus and reverb, the Moog delay, and now the Roland R880. So it does have quite a bit going on. So that guitar starts off panned hard left, but you obviously are hearing some of the effects on the right. And this other lighter guitar kind of joins in. And similar effects, it's got the Moog delay and the chorus reverb from the Lexicon unit. So that intro, so that's basically the intro. Let's just play those two guitars coming in. There we go, and then the vocals kick in. So I wanted to really focus on the intimacy of the vocals on this track, especially when the voice first comes in. So I actually dropped the guitar on the left, I kept the lighter guitar on the right, and I introduced a piano. So let's just hear that piano sound right now. So it's a really dark piano. High end out and a lot of the lower mids. I just wanted to really make it really dark, and especially with the effects, it creates a nice atmosphere. So that particular piano, I'm running it through a Drawmer tube station. I have the tube engaged, so it just gives it more kind of warmth and oomph to it. As far as delays, let's just hear it with the delays now. So once again, it's got the Moog delay, and it's got the Hall reverb from the Roland unit. And as I can see, it does have a little bit of the chorus reverb from the Lexicon. It just, for this track, like I usually don't use that much effect, but it seems to have worked for this particular song. So there it is, dry, Moog delay. I just love analog delays. And here it is with the reverb and a little bit of the well, actually, sorry, it doesn't have the Lexicon unit. It actually has a stereo spreader. It's kind of like a chorus from the Alesis Quadraverb. So that's what that's doing. Let me just play that without it. And here's with the stereo spreader. I just gained it a little bit more. Yeah, so let's put all the effects back on that. Yeah, so the piano kicks in and the vocals kick in. And let's just hear the vocal, the lead vocal on its own. So the lead vocal, it was recorded through a Manley reference C into a Chandler preamp. And I've talked highly about this microphone. I just love the fact that it sits so nicely in a mix, and I hardly have to touch the vocal EQ-wise. On this particular song, the vocal is running through the Klark Teknik 1176 and LA2A emulation. So the 1176 first, it kind of tames the peaks, and then a little bit more compression from the LA2A. And I love that combination on my vocals here. So yeah, let's just hear the vocal on its own. I never meant to cause you any sorrow. Like I said, EQ-wise, the Manley sounds pretty polished. You hardly have to do anything to it. I brought out a little bit of the high end. Yeah, a little bit of 8K and a little bit of just a tiny boost on 6K, and that's it. For my particular voice, that seems to have worked. I never meant to cause you any sorrow. So let's just hear it now with the effects. Effects-wise, I'm using a separate Hall effect from the Roland R880. So I have the main Hall effect from that unit for mainly the instruments, and I always use a specific reverb just for the vocals because I like a longer pre-delay. I don't like the vocal reverb to kick in right away. I like a slight delay before it kicks in, or else it really drowns out the vocals. Now for this song, obviously I got away with using a lot more reverb because the whole 80s vibe, I kind of went with that kind of feel. But let's just hear it with the effects. So right now the vocal is running through the Roland R880 reverb, and it's got a slight delay from the Korg SDD-3000. I never meant to cause you any sorrow. I never meant to cause you any pain. And it also has a bit of the chorus stereo spreader. I only wanted one time to see. So let's just hear the vocal raw and I'll bring in the effects.
I never meant to cause you any sorrow.
Actually, no, I just have those two effects on here.
I never meant to cause you any pain.
There's a slight delay. In the actual mix, you can't really
I
hear the
only
delay too
wanted
much. It
one
just
time to see you
kind of sits in nicely. Actually, I think I
laughing.
cranked it a little bit too much there.
I only wanted to see you laughing in the purple rain, purple rain, purple rain.
And there it is with all the effects. So let's just hear how that is kicking in with the instruments.
I never meant to cause you any sorrow. I never meant to cause you any pain.
And then we have some background vocals kicking in on some parts. I really wanted kind of like a church choir kind of vibe. I didn't do too many background vocals. At any given section, there's actually 3. There's the main harmony doubled, and then there's an additional harmony. So what I do is, the main harmony that's doubled, I double them once again in the computer and pan them hard left and right with a slight offset delay so that it really spreads things nicely. So let's just hear the background vocals on their own. And on the background vocals, I didn't put the main vocal reverb. I don't think. Let me just check that. No, I put the large hull from the main instruments.
Purple rain. Purple rain.
Now EQ wise, let's just solo the vocals. EQ wise, I kind of carved out the frequency that the main vocal sits in. So like in the lower mid range kind of area, I carved out a notch so that the lead vocal still really stands out. So that's the main thing. I didn't want it to take away from the lead vocal. But let's just hear the lead vocal kicking in with the background vocal so you can kind of hear what I mean there.
In the purple rain, purple rain, purple rain. Purple rain, purple rain.
Now as far as compression on the background vocals, there's not too much compression on there, but it's going through, let's just check what that is. Oh, it's going through this odd compressor that I have called an EP141. I don't know much about it, but it sounds like it has a little bit of iron on it, and it gives the background vocals a nice texture. So let's move on now. EQ wise, like I said, I carved out the mids, particularly at around 330. I carved out quite a bit. I brought out a little bit of the high end at 12K. And you can hear, you know, that giant hull on it. Let's just hear it one more time.
Purple rain.
It's got a nice kind of dreamy kind of feel. So I wanted this whole song to really build up. And the next section is the drums. So what I did for this particular song, I didn't want to program things by hand, so I actually played all the parts on my Alesis electronic drum set. And although the sounds on that Alesis drum set are nice, I wanted full control over each individual sound, and because the Alesis drum module only has a left and right, I couldn't really separate it unless you want to start bouncing things. So I didn't want to do that, but I just triggered it via MIDI, and then I just used the groove sampler, I think it's called, from Cubase, and I picked out a few kits that I liked, and I just went from there. But there's not too much going on. I didn't layer a ton of stuff. The great thing about analog is that just going through the actual mixer, things start coming together really nicely, and you don't have to fiddle with 100 plugins, which I hate to do. And yeah, that's about it. So let's just go through the sounds. So the first thing is the kick. I was generally pretty happy with how it sounded. I can tell you that the main kick and snare are going through a DBX 160 compressor. So let's just hear that kick right now. Now, I should add, all the drums on this track are going through 2 separate buses, and I'm using 2 separate buses for parallel compression just because it seems to have worked with, with my gear and stuff. But yeah, I'm just gonna play the drums and then with and without the parallel compression, and you can actually see what that does. Like I said, I didn't do nothing crazy. EQ wise, it's kind of pointless to tell you what works on this kick, because if you're using a different kick, you're gonna have to boost or cut different frequencies. So you really have to use your ears. But like I said, on this kick, it didn't need much. A little bit at, I think at 120 I boosted. With the compression, it sounded pretty good. So let's go on to the snare. The main snare I was pretty happy with. It's just solo. So that's the main snare. I was generally pretty happy with that sound. EQ wise, it looks like I didn't even touch it on the main track. Now I did double it in the computer because I wanted a fatter snare underneath. So the main snare is going through a DBX 160, and the secondary snare is going through just extra channels of compression, a Presonus compressor that I have 8 channels of that I just use randomly when I need extra. And it's not doing too much. It's a 2-to-1 ratio, but on this track, I really brought out the lower mid frequencies, and in particular, I guess in the 220 to 250 range, just to give it a lot of bottom. So there's that snare, with the more of the fat EQ, and there it is with the lead snare. I think together they sound great. And then we have the hi-hat. Like I said, EQ wise, I brought out a little bit of the highs at 12K. It sounded good, so I didn't have to really mess with it. And then finally, when at the final part of the song, there's a tom fill and a ride cymbal, and I put those on a stereo left and right channel, and you can hear those right now. And that's going through very little compression on a Presonus unit as well. And let's just hear the complete drums from the beginning. Effects wise, on the snare, there's a ton of reverb from my Lexicon MPX 550. It's that unit, like I said, it's usually just set on the PCM60 room sound. I love the way it sounds. Let me just show it to you on snare with and without that reverb. Like, that unit is just worth the price just for that effect. I love how that sounds, and you can pick up those things pretty cheap out there. So let's hear the drums without sending it through any bus. So here it is, just left, right. And then what I did was I sent it to bus number 1, which is, I have this old Korg compressor and EQ unit You can see the link in the description if you're more curious as to each unit. But that one's being squashed, and I'm bringing the signal back in on one of my sub tracks. So that's one of the sub tracks, and here's an additional sub. And you could just see how everything just came to life by bringing in those additional parallel tracks. So like I said, sub 1 and 2 is the Korg unit. Sub 3 and 4, what do I have that on? Sub 3 and 4. Oh yes, sub 3 and 4 is actually really nice. Let's just hear that on its own. It's a DBX 168. I don't see too many of those around, but for parallel drums, it sounds really good. So this is just the drums on that particular sub, going through the DBX 168. So yeah, it really does something to it. Let's bring in the other sub and the main. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how the drums sounded. And as you can see, I didn't have to do too much. If I was mixing in the box, likely I would have had to start stacking a lot of plugins, which I hate doing. Like I just like mixing this way. I come from the old school method, and I just find like I'm having more fun mixing hands-on with a board, with gear. But not to say that you can't get a good sound in the box. I've mixed for many years in the box, and you know, the results were still good. I'm just like I said, happier now. So the drums kick in, and another instrument that gets introduced, well actually no, the bass actually got introduced before the drums, I believe. So let's just hear what I did on the bass. It's a custom bass that it's recorded directly through a channeler preamp. The main bass track is going through the Joemeek British channel, and I boosted a little bit of the low end on there. I think the low end is at 100 hertz, I'm pretty sure. But I boosted a little bit there, and on the actual board I boosted a little bit at 450 and at about 2K. But I wanted a bit more grit, and this is the only plugin that I use on the entire song. So what I did was I made another copy of that bass, ran it through a separate channel on the board. I distorted it through the preamp, and I just stacked a few plugins on this. I put, what did I put on this? A FET compressor, really squashed the life out of it, and then I put the Oxford inflator. Oh, something's going on. Yeah, there's some licensing issue. I have to recheck with that. But basically, you know, I think together with those two bass tracks, I was pretty happy with how it sounded with the full drums there. So let's just hear bass and drums. And as far as effects on the bass, there's a bit. It's going through the Alesis Quadraverb stereo spreader patch. And just in case you want to hear that on its own, no effect, and with the stereo spreader. I thought I usually like to use some kind of chorus or stereo spreader on bass because I find that it kind of differentiates itself from the kick. Kicks, I always like mono. I don't really use stereo kicks anymore. I like everything mono. If I want a different sound, I'll run the kick through, you know, a particular room if I want more of a stereo effect. but I like my kicks mono, and the bass, I usually put some kind of a spreader just so it kind of gets out of the way. And EQ wise, you have to really work in the kick and bass. They can't be competing in the same frequencies. So you have to pick and choose what you want at what frequency. If the bass is going to really hover at around 100, the bass should do something else, either lower or higher from that frequency, so that, you know, they really play well with each other. So yeah, let's just hear the song, how everything's kicking in up to that point.
Purple rain, purple rain. Only wanted to see you bathing in the purple rain. I never wanted to be your weekend lover.
So like I said, I'm generally happy with how this has turned out. The audio quality, right now it's going through an external recorder, so the audio quality might be suffering right now. If you want to hear the full, unaltered sound, just click on the link in the description. I'll put a link to the actual completed song video so you can hear how that sounds. But yeah, at that point, the drums and bass kick in, and the only other instrument that I kind of had join in the guitar and piano is a pad. And let's just hear what that pad is doing. Yeah, so that pad, I think it's going through. Okay, so yeah, what I did to that pad is it's really squashed. It's going through another channel of the Drawmer tube station with the tube engaged, and effects wise it's going through the Roland Hall. And I also did this other little effect on there. I'm running it through the Vermona spring reverb. So let's just hear that. I'm just going to take off the Hall effect so you can hear the spring reverb sound. So there it is, raw. And there's the spring reverb. And the spring reverb is panned full right. So I like doing that a lot. I like using mono effects and panning them different ways. I feel that you could really bring a lot of depth to a mix by doing that. So that's what's going on there. And then on the final chorus, I have this cello. Right now I'm running my microphone through there, so the level is going to be off. But let me just see if it won't be too bad. Yeah, so I have that cello just in the last chorus to create even more excitement over everything else. That's playing along with the pad and all the other instrumentation. And let's just play the full track there.
Friendship had to end. Purple rain, purple rain. Purple rain, purple rain. Purple rain, purple rain. Only wanted to see you underneath the purple rain.
And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'm going to be trying to do a lot more of these tutorials in the future with songs that I actually produce myself. But yeah, I just wanted you to get a feel with, if you're into the analog type of mixing, what that what's involved in analog mixing. like I said, there's nothing wrong with mixing in the box. I've done it many years. I've started on analog, and I went in the box for convenience because I was doing a lot of stuff for film and TV. And yes, I gotta say, in the box, the recallability is priceless if you really need that. I'm at a point in my life right now that I don't need recallability. I'm not going to be called by a client and 2 weeks from now they're going to be asking me to raise a hi-hat in the second verse, as if that's going to make or break a song. So I don't need to worry about that, and that's why I went full analog. And like I said, it's different than mixing in the box. It's nice not having to reach for a plugin, and it's not. I just found when I was mixing in the box that I had to do a lot more work. Like, just to get things to sound decent, I had to really finesse plugins, stack a lot of plugins, use saturators, tape emulators, all that stuff, just to make things sound decent. And mixing in analog, just running the signal through the board, everything starts to just come together a lot quicker. And as you can see, I don't have 100 tracks. I think that's a big mistake that a lot of young up-and-coming producers do, is they think they need to have 100, 200 tracks on a song, and you really don't. I mean, there's a time and place for certain things. If you're doing a lot of orchestral work, if you're doing a stack of backgrounds, like even on this track, if I would have done 40 backgrounds, I could have did that and then just subbed them in the actual DAW, and I would have still brought them in on 2 channels. If I need these 2 channels for something more important, if a song has a lot more guitar parts or synthesizer parts, maybe I wouldn't even run the vocals through here, the background vocals. I'd save those 2 channels for something else. And you can always sub in the actual box. But for my setup, 16 channels is plenty. All the effects I am bringing back on tape returns. So there is quite a bit going on. I got my my Roland unit on my 2 stereo returns, and the full 8. I'm using the full 8 sends on this board. So it is nice to have at your disposal. I don't like to reach for a plugin every minute, and as you can see, the proof is in the pudding. I've only used a couple of plugins on this song on the 1 bass track, and it wasn't really necessary. I could have did without it, but I was experimenting around. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you have any questions, just leave me a comment, and if you want to hear the final mix of this song, just click on the link in the description and you'll be able to hear that. Oh, one thing I should add, so the final mix is going through a warm audio 2-bus compressor. I should have stated that, I apologize. But it's going through that compressor, and I have the transformers engaged, and I should play you a little bit of what it sounds like with and without the compressor and in transformers. So here's the mix. That's without. Now let's just engage the compressor on the 2-bus compressor. And now let's engage the transformers. So you can hear the transformer just really, it adds like some silk to it. It's a really nice effect. So what I did is I exported the mix, and I brought the mix back, and this is where I use my few plugins. I'm not a mastering engineer by any means, but I want to make my mixes sound competitive, so I actually brought the mix back, and what I added for basic level loudness is the Sony Oxford inflator, followed by the Sony Oxford limiter. I find those two plugins, it doesn't really suck the life out of your mix too much, and you can get, really competitive levels. And that's all I did. So yeah, if you want to hear the final compressed mastered version, you'll be able to hear it on the actual video of the song. Thanks.